I was organizing files in the supply closet when I heard my name echo through the marble hallway of Peterson and Associates. Emma Rodriguez needs to pack her things immediately. The voice belonged to Victoria Chen, the new VP of Operations who'd waltzed in 3 months ago with her Harvard MBA and zero understanding of how this place actually worked. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. I'd been the administrative coordinator here for 8 years. 8 years of arriving early, staying late, and blending into the background so seamlessly that executives discussed their most sensitive business right in front of me. They treated me like office furniture, useful, necessary, but completely invisible. What they didn't know was that I had a photographic memory and a small digital recorder that I'd been carrying in my cardigan pocket for the past 2 years. Not out of malice, but out of necessity. When you're the only Latina woman in a building full of white-collar men who think your name is Maria half the time, you learn to protect yourself. Victoria's heels clicked against the polished floor as she approached my desk in the main reception area. Behind her trailed 2 security guards and HR Director Janet Walsh, who couldn't meet my eyes. The entire office of 43 employees suddenly found their computer screens fascinating. "Emma," Victoria announced loudly, "we're restructuring your position. Effective immediately." She slapped a manila envelope on my desk. "Severance package. Security will escort you out." I looked up at her calmly. Victoria was 28, ambitious, and had spent the last 3 months making enemies of everyone who'd been here longer than her morning coffee routine. She wore her authority like an ill-fitting suit, constantly adjusting it, never quite comfortable. "May I ask the reason?" I asked, my voice steady. "Performance issues," she said, loud enough for the entire floor to hear. "Failure to adapt to new management protocols." Performance issues. I'd single-handedly managed the scheduling for 6 executives, coordinated 3 major client acquisitions, and hadn't taken a sick day in 2 years. But Victoria needed a scapegoat for the chaos she'd created, and the quiet girl was an easy target. I gathered my few personal items: a small succulent, a photo of my daughter Sophia, and my old leather purse. What I didn't tell them was that inside that purse, tucked into a hidden pocket my grandmother had sewn years ago, was a digital recorder containing 2 years' worth of recordings. As security walked me to the elevator, I heard Victoria already barking orders at my replacement, a temp who'd last maybe a week once she realized what she'd inherited. The elevator descended in silence. 23 floors down, I watched the numbers decrease, each one representing a small victory Victoria thought she'd won. The security guard, Mike Thompson, had worked here longer than Victoria had been alive in the professional world. "Sorry about this, Emma," he whispered. "We all know this is garbage." I smiled at him. "Thanks, Mike. Take care of yourself." In the lobby, I signed the final paperwork with a steady hand. The pen didn't shake. My signature was clear and legible. Janet from HR looked like she wanted to say something, but Victoria's presence loomed behind us like a storm cloud. "Your final paycheck will be directly deposited," Janet mumbled. "Of course," I replied. I walked out into the crisp October air of downtown Portland. The city bustled around me. Business people rushing to meetings, tourists taking photos of the bridges, street vendors calling out their lunch specials. Normal life continued while mine had just been derailed. But as I walked to my car, I felt something unexpected. Relief. For 2 years, I'd been carrying the weight of what I knew. The illegal meetings, the bid rigging, the discrimination lawsuits settled quietly to avoid publicity. All of it recorded, all of it documented, all of it sitting in my purse like a ticking time bomb. Victoria had just lit the fuse. My apartment in Southeast Portland was small but mine. No corporate politics, no power plays, just the life I'd built for my daughter and myself after her father left when she was 3. Sophia was at school, giving me time to process what had just happened. I made chamomile tea, a ritual that always helped me think clearly, and sat at my kitchen table with the digital recorder. It was a small device, no bigger than a USB drive, but it contained over 40 hours of recorded conversations from board meetings, executive lunches, and closed-door sessions. I'd started recording after the Henderson incident. Jennifer Henderson had been the lead accountant, a brilliant woman who'd discovered discrepancies in the Riverside Mall development project. When she brought her concerns to senior management, they thanked her for her diligence and promised to investigate. 2 weeks later, Jennifer was terminated for, quote, creating a hostile work environment. Her severance package came with a non-disclosure agreement that essentially bought her silence. I watched it happen from my desk, filing the paperwork, scheduling the meetings, being invisible while Jennifer's career was destroyed for doing her job. That's when I realized that someone needed to be watching the watchers. Someone they wouldn't suspect. Someone they'd overlooked so completely that they forgot I had ears. I plugged the recorder into my laptop and opened the first file. The audio was crystal clear, one of the advantages of always sitting close enough to pour coffee or distribute documents. The first recording was from 18 months ago, a meeting between CEO Richard Peterson and Development Director Kyle Morrison. Peterson's voice filled my kitchen. The environmental impact report for the Riverside project is problematic. We need to make some adjustments before it goes public. Morrison's response: what kind of adjustments? The kind that make it go away. I have a contact at Morrison Environmental, no relation to you, who can produce a cleaner version. Cost us about $50,000, but it's cheaper than redesigning the drainage system. That's illegal, Richard. Only if someone finds out. And who's going to look? The City Planning Commission owes us 3 favors from the waterfront development. This is just business. I paused the recording. Just business. That phrase had become Peterson and Associates' unofficial motto for anything that skirted the edge of legality. Environmental fraud, bid manipulation, discriminatory hiring practices. All just business. Over the next few hours, I organized the recordings chronologically. What emerged was a pattern of systematic corruption that went far beyond what I'd initially suspected. Peterson and Associates wasn't just cutting corners. They were running a criminal enterprise disguised as a development firm. The Riverside Mall project alone involved environmental fraud, bribery of city officials, and the use of subcontractors who employed undocumented workers at below minimum wages. But that was just the beginning. The Sunset Heights residential development had been approved after Peterson made a $75,000 campaign contribution to City Councilman Dave Williams. The contribution was funneled through 3 shell companies to avoid campaign finance laws. The Oak Street office complex had been built using materials that didn't meet safety codes. When the city inspector raised concerns, Peterson arranged for him to receive a consulting contract worth $40,000 annually in exchange for his silence. Most disturbing was the pattern of silencing whistleblowers. Jennifer Henderson wasn't the first. In the past 3 years, 7 employees had been terminated after raising ethical concerns. Each received a generous severance package and signed an ironclad NDA. Each thought they were alone in what they'd discovered. But I had been there for all of it. Filing their termination paperwork, scheduling their exit interviews, watching good people being crushed by a system designed to protect itself. And I had recorded every conversation that led to their downfall. As I listened to more recent recordings, I understood why Victoria had really fired me. It wasn't about performance or restructuring. It was about fear. 3 weeks ago, I recorded a meeting between Victoria and Peterson about the upcoming Greenfield Shopping Center project, a $200 million development that would make or break the company's financial future. The project required approval from the State Environmental Board, and Peterson was growing impatient with the legitimate review process. Victoria's voice on the recording: I have a contact on the Environmental Board. Sarah Martinez owes me a favor from my previous job. 1 phone call, and the Greenfield project gets fast-tracked approval. Peterson: what kind of favor? Victoria: the kind that ends careers if it becomes public. Sarah made some poor choices during the Metro Transit expansion. I helped cover it up, and now she owes me. Peterson: blackmail? Victoria: leverage. There's a difference. Peterson: I like your style, Victoria. Handle it. The next recording was from 2 days later. Victoria on the phone with Sarah Martinez. Sarah: it's Victoria. I need a favor. Remember the Metro Transit situation? The missing environmental assessments? The ones I helped you bury? I thought you might see it my way. Victoria had just committed extortion on tape. And she'd done it from the conference room where I was organizing files for the quarterly board meeting, invisible as always. But Victoria was smarter than the others. She'd noticed me in that meeting, noticed how I always seemed to be around when sensitive conversations took place. She'd started asking questions about my work schedule, my access to confidential areas, my longevity at the company. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. Firing me wasn't about restructuring. It was about eliminating a potential witness before the Greenfield project moved forward. Victoria couldn't afford to have someone around who might have overheard her extortion scheme. Unfortunately for Victoria, she was about a year too late. That evening, Sophia came home from school bubbling with excitement about her upcoming science fair project. At 12 years old, she had inherited my attention to detail and my ability to see patterns others missed. As she showed me her research on urban development's impact on local ecosystems, I realized she was describing exactly the kind of damage Peterson and Associates had been covering up for years. Mom, did you know that when developers don't do proper environmental impact studies, it can contaminate groundwater for decades? She said, spreading her notes across the kitchen table. I did know that, Mija. It's very important work you're doing. She looked at me carefully. You seem different today, sad but also determined. I smiled at my perceptive daughter. Sometimes grown-ups have to make difficult decisions about doing the right thing. Like standing up to bullies? Exactly like that. That night, after Sophia went to bed, I began the methodical work of building a case. Using my administrative skills and my detailed knowledge of the company's structure, I created a comprehensive timeline of illegal activities, cross-referenced with the recorded evidence. I identified the key players, Peterson as the ringleader, Morrison handling the development side corruption, Victoria managing government relations through blackmail, and CFO Thomas Harper, who had created an elaborate system of shell companies to hide bribery payments. Each recorded conversation was transcribed, time-stamped, and linked to supporting documentation that I'd copied over the years. Invoices, emails, contract modifications, personnel files, all the paperwork that executives signed without reading, trusting their invisible administrative coordinator to handle the details. By 3 a.m., I had assembled a 847-page dossier documenting a criminal conspiracy involving environmental fraud, government bribery, extortion, labor violations, and systematic witness intimidation. The recordings provided audio evidence, but the paper trail I'd meticulously maintained provided the context and corroboration that would make the case airtight. The next morning, I called in sick to my waitressing job at the diner where I'd started working to pay the bills. Instead, I drove to the offices of the Portland Tribune, a local newspaper known for investigative journalism and holding powerful people accountable. Reporter Michael Chang had broken the story about corruption in the city's housing authority the year before. His articles had led to 3 indictments and a complete overhaul of the agency. If anyone would understand the significance of what I'd uncovered, it would be him. Chang's office was cluttered with file boxes, newspaper clippings, and the controlled chaos that seemed to follow investigative reporters. He was younger than I'd expected, maybe 35, with the intense focus of someone who'd learned to spot truth in a world full of carefully crafted lies. Ms. Rodriguez, he said, gesturing to a chair across from his desk. You said on the phone that you had information about corruption at Peterson and Associates. I placed a single folder on his desk. This is a summary of what I have. The full documentation is much more extensive. He opened the folder and began reading. I watched his expression change as he processed the scope of what I was alleging. After 10 minutes, he looked up. If this is accurate, we're talking about federal crimes, environmental fraud, government corruption, RICO violations. You understand the magnitude of what you're claiming? I understand that good people have been silenced while criminals got rich building projects that endanger public safety and environmental health. And you have recordings of these conversations? I nodded. Over 40 hours of audio evidence, plus supporting documentation dating back 3 years. Chang leaned back in his chair. Why come forward now? Why not when you first discovered this? Because I needed to protect myself and my daughter. Single mothers who make accusations against powerful men don't typically fare well in these situations. I needed to build an airtight case before I spoke up. And what changed? They fired me yesterday. Victoria Chen, the VP of Operations, terminated me because she suspected I might have overheard something about her extortion scheme. By trying to silence me, she confirmed that I was a threat worth eliminating. Chang picked up his pen. I'm going to need to verify everything you're telling me. The paper won't run this story unless we can independently confirm the allegations. I understand, but I need something in return. What's that? Protection. Once this story breaks, Peterson and his associates will know it came from me. They've demonstrated a pattern of intimidating witnesses. I need assurance that my daughter and I will be safe. Chang nodded. We work with law enforcement on stories like this. If the evidence supports criminal charges, the FBI will likely offer you witness protection. Good. Because there's one more thing you need to know. What's that? The Greenfield Shopping Center project that Peterson is pushing through. The Environmental Board is meeting next week to give final approval. Victoria's extortion scheme is designed to push that approval through before anyone can review the legitimate environmental concerns. Chang's eyes sharpened. How much time do we have? The board meets Thursday. Today is Monday. Then we'd better get started. The next 72 hours passed in a blur of fact-checking, document review, and verification calls. Chang brought in 2 additional reporters and a legal expert who specialized in government corruption cases. They worked with the methodical precision of surgeons, dissecting every claim, verifying every recording, and building corroborating evidence. The environmental fraud allegations required consultation with experts who could explain the technical violations. The bribery charges needed campaign finance records and city council voting patterns. The labor violations required interviews with former subcontractors who'd been too intimidated to speak up previously. But the most crucial element was verifying the authenticity of the recordings. Chang arranged for a forensic audio expert to analyze the digital files, confirming that they hadn't been edited or manipulated. The timestamps matched my detailed logs, and voice recognition software confirmed the identity of the speakers. By Wednesday evening, Chang had assembled a team of 5 reporters and confirmed the story with 3 independent sources. The paper's legal team had reviewed every allegation and concluded that the evidence supported publication. We're going to print Thursday morning, Chang told me during our final meeting. The story will run online at midnight. Print edition hits the streets at 6 a.m. What about the Environmental Board meeting? We've already contacted Board Chairwoman Linda Foster. She's postponing the Greenfield vote pending a full investigation of the allegations. Quote, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders that I'd been carrying for 2 years. What happens next? The FBI field office has already been contacted. They'll want to interview you Thursday morning. The State Attorney General's office is also opening an investigation. And Peterson and Associates? By noon tomorrow, they'll be dealing with federal agents, state investigators, and a media firestorm. Their business will essentially be frozen while the investigation proceeds. That night, I tucked Sophia into bed and told her that things were going to change in our lives, but that we were going to be okay. Are you finally standing up to those bullies, Mom? Yes, mija, I am. Good. I'm proud of you. I woke up at 5:30 a.m. and immediately checked my phone. The Portland Tribune's website featured the story as its lead headline. Recorded conversations reveal systematic corruption at major development firm. The article was thorough, professional, and devastating. Chang had presented the evidence methodically, letting the recorded conversations speak for themselves. The environmental fraud, the government bribery, the witness intimidation, all of it laid out with the precision of a legal indictment. By 7 a.m., my phone was ringing constantly. Other reporters, law enforcement agencies, former employees of Peterson and Associates, who suddenly felt safe enough to add their voices to the chorus of allegations. The first call that mattered came at 8:15 a.m. FBI Special Agent Sandra Williams introduced herself and requested a meeting at the federal building downtown. The second important call came from attorney Patricia Morrison, no relation to Kyle Morrison from Peterson and Associates, who specialized in whistleblower protection and wanted to represent me pro bono. But the call that satisfied me most came at 9:22 a.m. from Jennifer Henderson, the accountant who'd been destroyed for trying to expose the Riverside Mall fraud. "Emma," she said, her voice thick with emotion, "I just read the story. You did it. You actually did it." "We all did it, Jennifer. Your original investigation of Riverside was what opened my eyes to what was happening. I thought I was alone. I thought I was crazy for thinking they'd destroy my career just to hide their crimes. You weren't alone. None of us were alone. We just didn't know it at the time." By noon, Peterson and Associates had locked their doors. Federal agents were executing search warrants, seizing computers, files, and financial records. The company's bank accounts were frozen pending investigation. I watched the news coverage from Patricia Morrison's law office, where I was giving my formal statement to FBI agents. The sight of Richard Peterson doing a perp walk in handcuffs was surreal after years of watching him operate with complete impunity. Victoria Chen had been arrested at her apartment, charged with extortion and conspiracy to commit fraud. Kyle Morrison was taken into custody at the construction site of the Sunset Heights development. Thomas Harper was arrested at his country club, interrupting his weekly golf game. But the most satisfying moment came when I saw Sarah Martinez, the environmental board member, being led away in handcuffs. Victoria's leverage over her had evaporated the moment her extortion scheme became public. The environmental board announced a comprehensive review of all projects approved in the past 3 years. The city council launched an ethics investigation into campaign contributions from development firms. The state attorney general promised criminal charges against everyone involved in the conspiracy. The legal proceedings took 18 months. Peterson, Victoria, Morrison, and Harper all pleaded guilty to federal corruption charges. Peterson received 8 years in federal prison. Victoria got 6 years. The others received sentences ranging from 3 to 5 years. Sarah Martinez cooperated with investigators and received a suspended sentence in exchange for her testimony about the extortion scheme. She resigned from the environmental board and left public service entirely. The civil lawsuits took longer. Peterson and Associates was dissolved, its assets liquidated to pay fines and restitution to the victims of their fraud. The Riverside Mall was shut down for 18 months, while environmental remediation work corrected the damage from their corner cutting. The Sunset Heights development was demolished and rebuilt to proper safety standards. I testified before Congress about corporate whistleblower protection and the need to safeguard employees who report illegal activities. My story became a case study in business ethics courses and law schools. But the most meaningful outcome was personal. Sophia and I moved to a better neighborhood, and I went back to school to finish my business degree. The whistleblower reward from the federal investigation provided financial security I'd never had before. More importantly, I'd found my voice. The quiet girl who'd been invisible for so long had spoken up when it mattered most, and her words had brought down a criminal enterprise. 2 years after the story broke, I was hired as the Director of Ethics and Compliance for the Portland Housing Authority. My job was to ensure that the city's development projects met all legal and ethical standards, and to create systems that protected employees who reported violations. On my first day, I noticed a young woman working as an administrative assistant in the planning department. She was quiet, efficient, and seemed to blend into the background while executives discussed sensitive matters around her. During lunch, I introduced myself. Her name was Amy Chen, no relation to Victoria, and she'd been working there for 6 months since graduating from Portland State. "How do you like it here?" I asked. She hesitated. "It's fine. The work is interesting. It's just what?" "I notice things, conversations, decisions that seem questionable. But I'm just an admin assistant. Who would listen to me?" I smiled and handed her my business card. "Someone who understands exactly what you mean. My door is always open, Amy, and nothing you tell me will ever be held against you." She looked at the card, then back at me. "You're the whistleblower, the one who brought down Peterson and Associates. I'm the former quiet girl who learned that silence isn't always golden." Sometimes the most important thing you can do is speak up. 3 months later, Amy came to my office with concerns about bid rigging in the public housing renovation project. Her observations led to an investigation that prevented $2 million in fraud and resulted in criminal charges against 2 contractors. Amy wasn't quiet anymore, and neither was I. The Peterson and Associates case became a landmark in corporate accountability and whistleblower protection. The recordings I'd made were cited in federal court decisions about employee rights and the admissibility of covert evidence in corruption cases. Jennifer Henderson went back to school and became a forensic accountant specializing in fraud detection. 3 other former Peterson employees who'd been silenced through NDAs had their agreements voided and received settlements for wrongful termination. Sophia, now 15, chose environmental science as her major area of study. She wanted to prevent the kind of damage that companies like Peterson and Associates had caused through their fraud and corner cutting. "You showed me that one person really can make a difference," she told me during her high school graduation speech. "My mother taught me that doing the right thing isn't always easy, but it's always worth it." I sat in the audience, no longer invisible, no longer quiet, no longer afraid to take up space in the world. The girl who'd hidden in supply closets and recorded conversations from the shadows had become a woman who spoke truth to power and protected others from the kind of exploitation I'd witnessed. Sometimes the most powerful weapon isn't the loudest voice in the room. Sometimes it's the quiet observer who's been paying attention all along, waiting for the right moment to speak up and change everything. Victoria Chen had fired the quiet girl, thinking she was eliminating a threat. Instead, she'd freed the one person who had the evidence to destroy everything they'd built on lies and corruption. She should have left me alone. But I'm grateful she didn't, because some stories need to be told, no matter how long you have to wait in the shadows to tell them. And this was one of those stories. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.